What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Gaming Without Parole. My name's Brian. No, that's not how we do this. Let's try this one more time. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Gaming Without Parole. Sitting across from me this week and every week is Dezrah.
And sitting across from me is Brian Paul.
Hey, what's going on? Just as we get started here, I want to make sure that if this is your first time watching Gaming Without Parole, if you stumbled across this on the interweb,
welcome.
Yeah, thanks for checking us out. Crazy. I'm not sure why you're here, but stick around. It's going to get great.
We make awesome content. That's why they're here.
We do. So subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/withoutparolegames, and then if you really like what we do, I mean, really, really like it, we have a Patreon page where you can support us because we're hemorrhaging money. Patreon.com/withoutparolegames, and throw us a couple bucks. Again, if you don't want to throw us any money, we totally understand. Free content is the best kind of content, and that is it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's it.
Yeah. We're not going to be millionaires off of this, but we do want to be able to keep making the content. So
absolutely,
any help would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are we talking about this week, Dezrah?
Well, today we're talking about a personal disappointment, which hopefully will be rectified, but probably the hottest gift of this holiday season, at least for our crowd, the NES Classic.
Yeah.
Now, I was disappointed. Are we really doing that?
No. There's nothing here.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have one because they're impossible to find.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed. My wife wanted to get one for both of us, pretty much for our Christmas present to each other, and I think she underestimated how crazy it was going to be because she was like, "Yeah, I went to GameStop and Target and they didn't have any." Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, nobody has any right now, which is pretty typical Nintendo strategy.
Yeah,
it's like, let's make everyone angry first and then over deliver later.
Because I mean, just like we talked about in our Wii episode, almost a year in, it was still hard to find a Wii.
Yeah. So, but we were talking about, it was like, well, let's talk about at least the games we're excited to eventually play that are on the system, because I think they actually did a pretty good job with the titles they picked.
They did a good job with the titles. From all accounts, however, not a flawless system.
No,
not upgradable in any sense of the word. What you got the 30 games that you got, and that is it. Mm-hmm. And then the big disappointment, it seems to be the 2.5-foot controller cords.
Yeah, that is a problem, but I don't know. I think to get it at the price point it came out at, those are some of the sacrifices they kind of had to make. Because if you think about $60 for a piece of consumer electronics these days, that's a pretty low price. Yeah. And you're going to be able to buy all the accessories. A Nyko already has a wireless controller for it.
Yeah. And is it Belkin? No, who is it? For $8 more, you can get the extension cable.
Yeah. And also, if you already have the classic controller for your Wii, that works with this as well.
Absolutely.
So you may already have peripherals that'll work with this. So it's, I mean, yes, it's annoying. And, again, my wife was one of the ones who was just like, really? It's going to be that short? But I don't know. For $60, 30 games for me that are pretty fantastic, I'm not going to come too much. And the non-upgradable part,
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be an NES Classic 2 next year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
With all the games that it's missing.
Yeah.
So we want to talk a little bit about what games we are really happy about that are on the list.
Yeah. And
maybe a few that we are disappointed didn't make the list. Would you care to start?
Yeah. So this actually brings me into a conversation. So I think we mentioned in the Midnight Games cast that I was at Rhode Island Comic Con this past weekend. Yay! No one came to see my show, or at least didn't identify ourselves.
No one yelled, "Dance, monkey, dance"?
No, I was disappointed. But
I am too.
I did see something that kind of inspired me to actually change the games I was talking about. Brian may remember he got a random text out of nowhere saying, "What was your favorite Final Fantasy character?"
Yep.
And he said, "The fighter." So here we are.
No way.
And of course, my favorite character was the Black Mage.
That is phenomenal.
I love that he's actually in the celebratory, "We just beat the bad guy." And I promised those folks I would give them a plug. So these are handmade by a group, Cornelius Pixel Crafts. We can throw their Twitter down there.
Yep.
Really, really cool guys. They had all sorts of 8-bit characters and sprites made out of this craft material. And yeah, it's just, pretty short money and a really cute little thing. So I just saw these and this is going up on my bookshelf.
This is the greatest thing ever.
And neither of them are green either, which is really nice.
Oh, fantastic. We like that big time.
Cool.
All right.
So, but yes, that is...
I'm going to order all of them from them. This is great.
They had everybody.
Oh,
so
amazing.
Cool. But yeah, we're going to be talking, at least I'm going to be talking about Final Fantasy, and I just realized I'm on the wrong page, so we're going to go back there. Not a lot to say about this. I mean, this is one of the standalone classic RPGs of all time. Certainly not the first by any means, but the first a lot of people remember playing. Yeah. One of my favorite things about doing this show is, one, we get to kind of hang out and chill. Yeah. We get to talk about geeky stuff, but it's little kind of weird nuggets of information I find out when we're doing our research.
Seriously.
So if you're not familiar with the game, there's an overworld, you walk around, you have random encounters with enemies, you beat them, you get experience points. It's a role-playing game. Here's the thing I found out about it that I didn't realize. Square thought this was going to be their last game.
Oh, yeah.
They were this close to bankruptcy. And they were like, all right, this is it. Now, the legend is that they named it Final Fantasy because of that. That's actually not true. Apparently, the creator was, I just read an interview, they were pretty much just looking for something that had FF as the initials, because I guess in Japanese, that sounds really good. And originally, they had looked at Fighting Fantasy, but then there was an actually pen and paper role-playing game that had that name. So they were like, all right, Final Fantasy. But then the story was a little too good for it not to be like their Final Fantasy, so that kind of that legend sort of took off. In fact, Square actually wasn't even going to make it, but then they saw the success of Dragon Quest, like, all right, well, I guess there is money in them thar hills. Another little first. This was the first RPG to have enemies on one side and your party on the other. Before that, with the original Dragon Quest, it was first person.
Oh,
you
right.
You saw the little slime on the screen, then you had your options down at the bottom. So if you ever played any role-playing game since Final Fantasy, I can't think of too many where it's not enemies here, your party here.
Yeah, I can't.
Even Costume Quest, which we talked about last week,
Yep.
goes to that standard. You had your 5 classes, your typical iconographic, fighter, thief, red mage, white mage, black mage, and black belt. They would upgrade. Look, if you haven't played Final Fantasy, you can now play it. I mean, you don't. If you're like us and you didn't get your Nintendo Classic, you can play it on anything.
Really anything.
This is another one of those games that if there is a LCD screen near you, you can play Final Fantasy on it. They even made it for Windows Phone.
Except that's not where we want to play it. We want to play it on the Game Boy Advance. That was a great remake.
Yes.
Also, the PlayStation Portable had a great remake. These are the places you want to play them.
And even the Android one, they really, I kind of like the old 8-bit graphics, but they really prettied it up for a lot of these remakes. It uses kind of more modern sensibilities to it. But, to me, this is my Final Fantasy. This is what it looks like. Hey. No Cloud, just a nameless black mage.
Yep.
I always named mine 4Q.
Like the number 4 in the letter Q?
Yep. There was 4Q was my black mage, and 4Q2 was my white mage.
Should I ask why?
4Q.
Oh. And moving on. No, Final Fantasy is a great choice. And I think, honestly, I was like, oh, you should play it on this or that. Mm-hmm. No, Nintendo is maybe a great place to play, especially with this Nintendo Classic. There are save states.
And that's going to get controversial with some of the games we're talking about, because one of the difficult things that made these games so difficult way back then was there was no saving.
Yeah.
Maybe you had a game that had codes, but you do have save states built into Nintendo Classic. So
and I think really for we're a little bit older and we have a little bit less time than we used to. Save states are a lifesaver.
Yes.
So highly recommended. You might actually enjoy the game a little bit more without the fear of losing tons of progress every time you die. I want to take it away with and this is such a strange game. I can't believe this one. It's about as simple as they come. Mm-hmm. Kid Icarus.
Yay!
Right? By Nintendo's R&D 1 team, who were the same people who made Metroid.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Right? And the similarities between the two games are actually they feel very similar when you play them, even though they act very different.
Yep.
Of course, we all know what games we're talking about, but in Kid Icarus is one of those few games that's a side-scrolling platformer, but for the most part, scrolls vertically.
Right.
You're constantly just going. You're jumping up, and the screen is scrolling up with you. You can run through the right side of the screen, end up on the left, which is essential to keep going up. But the screen never scrolls back down. So if you fall into the pit,
right,
Pit.
The other Pit.
Then you're dead. So it's interesting because side-scrolling games really took off.
Yeah.
Vertically scrolling games never really
Not
did.
too many Ice Climbers?
Yeah, that's the only other one that I could think of, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Ice Climbers.
Yep.
So if you're going to play a vertically scrolling game, go for Kid Icarus.
Yeah. So this was called Myth of Light, the Mirror of Palutena. I'm really bad with Greek mythology,
Yeah.
so I apologize for that. I'm going to say Palutena, and I don't know if that's correct. And that's what it was called during its development. It was in development for the Nintendo or the Famicom disk drive in Japan.
Okay.
Of course, it was a cartridge eventually. So, yeah, you're going through these levels and you're tracking down these 3 sacred treasures, the mirror shield, the light arrows, and the wings of Pegasus. It's different endings. Nothing crazy. But you do, of course, want the ending where Pit grows and becomes a man and like a full angel instead of like the little angel that he is. Highly criticized game because it's extremely difficult.
Which I think was going to be a very common theme with a lot of these games.
Yeah, absolutely. I never beaten it.
No.
I was watching videos today of Kid Icarus, and like it's not that far in where you get to literally a normal side-scrolling level, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this. Like for myself, I've played the game hundreds of times, and I guess I just haven't gotten very far. I'm really bad at it.
Yeah.
So high difficulty. What was the point of this? Oh, one of the cute things that I found. Do you remember the show Captain N, the Game Master?
That's all that's been running through my head the second you said the word Kid Icarus.
Yep.
But yes, by all means.
So Kid Icarus, of course, was in
most
Captain...
annoying voice ever.
Yeah. Oh, and didn't he like add the word like the Icus to like everything he said?
Yes.
Yeah, it was really annoying.
It was just
But you also remember the one of the villains in Captain N was the Eggplant Wizard.
Yes.
Also came from this.
Right.
So pretty crazy. The weird.
I just hear that grating voice in the back of my head. I'm not going to do the impression. Don't even know.
No.
But if you need the pain, you can find it.
I will say I didn't like. I hated all the characters in that. Simon Belmont was awful.
Yeah.
Mega Man was awful.
So is it totally off topic? But there was the Captain N show, and then there was the Super Mario show.
Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
And they always teased the Link one. I never saw a single Link episode.
What? No, it was so. Captain N in the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, 2 different shows entirely.
Yes.
But Super Mario Brothers Super Show was Super Mario Brothers Monday through Thursday, and then every Friday was The Legend of Zelda.
I never saw these. I don't know if they didn't broadcast them to me, or maybe I don't know.
Every Friday. Yep. And they were always my favorite because they were a little more in my head as a kid. They were always more serious.
Yes.
But then you watch them now, and Link is always being like, "Well, excuse me, princess."
Oh, really?
It's really, really bad.
Maybe it's better that I didn't see it then.
Yeah, I don't know. So, the weird thing. This is the weird thing about Kid Icarus is it's kind of like beloved by fans.
Okay.
And it's one of those classic Nintendo characters, like almost as classic as Mario, almost as classic as Samus. But there's only been 3 games since 1987 with Kid Icarus in it.
Yeah.
Or with him in the title.
Okay.
Because of course he, shows up in Smash Brothers, like every Smash Brothers. But he was only in Kid Icarus on this one right here, and then the sequel. There was a Game Boy sequel in '91.
Okay.
And then there was the 3DS game in 2012, and that was it. Like we've only gotten 3 official Kid Icarus games.
That's weird.
All of these years.
Yeah, and
like
especially
years.
with a company like Nintendo that milks their IPs for every drop. It's kind of unusual.
This is why the Wii U failed, because we didn't
have
have a Kid Icarus game.
That was it.
That was it. We figured it out, Nintendo. You should have launched the Switch with a Kid Icarus game.
It's not too late.
Yeah, you could probably shit one out in like 5 minutes. All right, what's yours? Okay. What's your next one?
On that note, here's another game nation. So we're talking about games that we're excited to play. For me, this whole console is about nostalgia. And we talked about this. Honestly, maybe some of our audience and Brian too was maybe a little less excited about this because we're like, oh, I'm a retro gamer. Anyways, I already have all these games.
Totally
I don't really need. But for me, I'm not. I don't even have a functional NES in my house, and this is when I get fired.
I was gonna say I have like 3 behind the green screen.
So for me, it's going to be like, oh, wow, I get to play all these games I haven't played since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the first game I saw on the list there, Excite Bike.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like not one of the... I mean, it's a classic Nintendo game, but when people go down the list of like, oh, I really want to go play this game, Excite Bike is like, really? But for me, this is the game that me and my brother spent so much time on, mostly because of the design of track level. I mean, there was 3 modes of playing. There was one just kind of time trials where you're on the tracks by yourself, racing around. There was another versus the computer, and then there was design mode where you could make your own tracks. Mm-hmm. And we would spend hours just doing the tracks and like, okay, I want to do the track. Now you play this one, and going back and forth like that. And again, to my theme of weird little things I discovered, the save and load. So if you remember from the original
I know this.
Excite Bike, there were all these things, and there was save and load. Like you'd spend forever making this track and like go to save it. It didn't work. Just like, whoa, is my copy broken or what? We didn't have the internet back then, so we just sucked it up and dealt with it.
Yep.
And if you looked in the manual, it said, oh, these are for some future expansion we might do. That was a lie. Nintendo, you lied to us.
Yeah.
The truth is, the Famicom, which was this game was developed for, had a tape drive accessory. A cassette tape drive. So,
This wasn't a disc drive. This was a cassette.
This was a cassette one. Its actual name was doesn't matter.
No,
not
really.
particularly.
Right.
The Famicom data recorder.
There you have it.
And so you had the save and load screens for that, which totally makes sense. You're designing this, level. You might want to be able to save it and play it again later. So it's just I just remember it was one of those weird things back when we were kids. Like, oh, we must have a broken one, and no, we weren't broken. Nintendo. You were broken. You lied to the children of America. But yeah, not a whole lot to say.
I love the music in this game.
The music is great.
Right.
You've got a very simplistic control scheme, but actually works out really well.
Yeah.
One axis on the D-pad moves your direction. The other actually lets you tilt back so you can do wheelies, which was mind-blowing when we were kids. Yeah, and it's for me. That's going to be one game I'm just going to sit down and play with the stupid. I'm going to call my brother over. It's like, hey, remember this game, and probably blow Thanksgiving or at this rate next Thanksgiving playing this. So
and for the first time ever, you'll be able to save your tracks with a save state. Right. My favorite thing about Excite Bike is a mistake they made.
Okay.
And I noticed this when I was a kid, and it seems like no one else ever talks about this. It's the perspective is broken because in the back there's all these stadiums with I think a Nintendo logo on it.
Yeah.
And in the foreground it's the track.
Right.
Now, any game that has proper 3D perspective, the back and everything far away should be moving slower than the stuff in the front. That stadium in the back with all the fans and Nintendo logo is like flying by, and it's always been jarring to me because the perspective is literally broken. It's backwards.
It's a pretty old game though, so I wonder if 1980. Yeah, it was a launch title for the NES.
Nice.
So I just wonder if they didn't have the technology to do that at that point.
Check it out.
Yeah.
You'll see.
Okay.
It's not scrolling at the same speed. It's scrolling at a faster speed than the foreground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they just screwed it. I see.
Yep. I don't know why.
I wonder if they're going to fix that in the classic version.
I doubt it. I feel like I'm the only person that ever brings this up, and no one else ever knows what I'm talking about. So there should be some video behind this that shows the weird perspective.
Either he's right or wrong. We don't know.
We have no idea. It's all green over here. So another one that I can't wait to play. I mean, when I say I can't wait to play, I have it, and I love playing it.
Yeah.
But I will say, having an HDMI out that goes into my TV is just so much better than bringing a Nintendo through my or whatever.
Much easier.
Yeah, I can't even use like Nintendo branded things to get an HDMI output. So,
and I think that's the idea behind this too. Just not to derail, but the idea is just grab it and plug it in anywhere, anytime.
It's so nice.
Yeah. You don't have to. You've got an HDMI port. Boom, plug it in, start it up, and you can go.
And collecting for the NES is getting so expensive. If you were to buy all 30 of these games,
I can't imagine.
It would cost you hundreds of dollars instead of $60. So this is a phenomenal deal.
I just think this isn't the random shovelware. This is some of their top tier titles, which is pretty good.
And before we finish, we will go through the entire list. I should have started with the list, I guess. Dr. Mario. I have spent so much time in my life playing Dr. Mario 2-player. You can spend hours just... You talked about being in the zone on a 2D platformer last week. And when you get in the zone on high levels of Dr. Mario, you are in the zone. Like
so good.
People are talking around you and like walking past the TV, and you don't see any of them. You are just killing it. So it's a Tetris clone.
Yep.
Dropping pills basically down to get rid of viruses, and it's all about matching colors.
Right.
If you can match the color of the virus to 4 halves of a pill, the virus disappears, and the first one to clear all the viruses from the board wins the round. Or if you're playing single player, you advance to the next round.
Yeah.
One of the things that's great about this is that it was produced by Gunpei Yokai, the creator of the Game Boy.
Oh.
And maybe even more famously, the creator of the Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I say his name right? Gunpei Yokai? I hope so. I feel awful. He's not around anymore, so I don't like
Virtual
to...
Boy.
Yeah. So even though he wasn't the developer on it, he's got good pedigree. This guy knows what he's doing, which probably explains why it's so good. You find modified versions of Dr. Mario as mini-games on WarioWare Incorporated Mega Microgames on the Game Boy Advance. You also find versions of it on Brain Age 1 and 2 on the DS.
Right.
And then the best part is that Dr. Mario, the game, has been ported or remade or has a sequel on every single home Nintendo console since the original NES.
I absolutely believe that.
And almost all of their handhelds.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you say it's a Tetris clone, which is, a description of the type of game, but I think in a lot of ways it's more fun than Tetris. The animation, the little viruses are adorable. And then you have the whole chain system. Yep. So when you dissolve one side of a pill, the other side just drops until it hits something. So you can set up these chains where this drops, and there is no feeling better in the world than having the whole screen go up in these chains and just...
that is, if you can plan all that ahead of time, that's part of being in the zone.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you can see 7 steps ahead sometimes, and it's like chess, it's magic.
Sure, you get that one moment when you get that forward block to drop in on Tetris and get 4, but... Man, just chaining up all the interactions like that. Yeah,
it's funny too because I've played this game a million times, but I was trying to remember all the different colors of the different pills and viruses.
Blue, red, yellow, green. No.
Blue, red, and yellow.
No green.
That is it.
Huh.
That is it.
Blue, red, and yellow.
It makes it seem so simple. And just like any good Nintendo game,
there's no green.
The concept is simple, but to master it is difficult.
There's no green.
There is no green. I'm blue. Wow. If I was green, I would die.
Can we have the mic problems this week? That was awful.
We're not airing this one.
Okay.
Since we're not airing this one, why don't you tell us about your next game?
So this one, when I first heard about the Nintendo Classic, I was like, I hope they have this game. There's no way they're going to have it because I'm the only person who likes this game. And it's one of the launch games. Star Tropics.
There's a launch game?
I mean, not a launch game. It's one of the games on the...
It's on
not a launch game. Yeah, yes. I shouldn't say launch game. But yeah, Star Tropics. Oh my god.
So good.
Yeah, and this was one, like, I remember playing this so much, and it's one of those, no one has any idea. He's walking around this island with a yo-yo, and it's kind of like Link, but it's not. And so either you know it and you're super psyched about this, or you have no idea what I'm talking about. This was originally released in 1990. What's interesting about this is one of the few titles that was only released for North America and Europe. Really? It was not released in Japan.
Where was it developed?
It was developed in the U.S. by Japanese developers who lived here in the U.S. The idea was, okay, look, there's Final Fantasy, all these other things are working really well in Japan, but Americans, I'm putting my words into their mouths, but Americans are kind of dumb. So why don't we make one that'll appeal to Americans? Now, I don't think they actually said Americans are dumb, but they wanted to make it a little more culturally, a little culturally acceptable. So you play as Mike.
Yes.
Mike, yes. You're visiting your archaeologist uncle, like you do, on the island of Coral Cola, or Sea Island, because it's sea-shaped. Aliens abduct him, like they do, and you have to spend the rest of the game trying to rescue him. The only weapon you were given at the beginning is a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And since you are a baseball player and a pitcher, apparently that's a good weapon for you to use. don't understand that leap of logic, but I love it anyways. And if that kind of thinking floats your boat, then you're going to love the rest of this game. Some things that make it interesting, it is kind of like wow, my brain just stopped. It's a role-playing game and an action game kind of all together. You have an overworld you're moving around, and then once you get into dungeons and places like that, it drops into a world that looks very similar to like a Zelda kind of thing.
Yeah.
Except your movement is basically limited to these sort of invisible tile system. So you can only move up or down or left or right, but you can change your orientation on each of those tiles, which it takes a little getting used to, but once you kind of get the hang of it, it's actually pretty nice because you never have the problem of missing. Like if you're shooting at something, throwing one of your weapons or your yo-yo or whatever, if you're at least in the same line, you're going to hit the opponent, which is nice. Lots of thinking, lots of puzzling.
Lots of puzzles. Yeah,
Yes,
I remember that.
yeah.
Lots of secret paths, hidden objects.
Yes, there are enemies that are absolutely invisible, so you have to figure out how to see them to fight them. So lots of thinking. And, well, I will say this. If you've ever wanted to play a game that was family-friendly, where a parrot looks at you and says, "Do me so far, do me," over and over again, this is your game. Do you remember this?
I don't remember this.
You don't remember this?
No.
Okay. So it's actually a hint to one of the puzzles, and I'm not going to say much more than that, but I just remember seeing this as my, whatever, when I was like 10-year-old self.
Yeah.
Like, he said, "Do me." And actually, speaking of puzzles and clues, something that was really, really cool about the original Star Tropics, which won't be happening with this, is one of the puzzles had a code.
Oh, you needed a manual.
You needed the manual because the manual had a special piece of paper in it that had a letter from your uncle.
Yeah.
And to decode the code, you actually had to take the letter and dip it in water. And when it got wet, the code would be revealed.
Right.
So they're not doing that for this version. Obviously, they're not going to include the paper. But I was looking around, and there was one version that's put out for the Wii Virtual Console. And there was basically a place where once that you got to that part of the story, a virtual letter would come up and dip in some, there was an animation of it dipping in the water so you could see the code. So it's kind of harkens back to the old days of, all these things being included in games to stop piracy and whatnot.
Right.
It was just another little touch to get you into this world. A little funny, a little weird, lots of puzzling, lots of thinking. It's a fantastic game.
I told you when you brought up Star Tropics, when you said you want to talk about this one, I'd mentioned that probably very recently was my first experience with it.
Yeah.
I was going back and like buying all these old NES games and catching up on games from my childhood that I, maybe I think I even owned Star Tropics a couple of times, but just never really got into it.
Yeah.
And then about 7 or 8 years ago, my internet went down. And
Oh right, yeah.
I was unable to like even play the PlayStation 3 games I think that I was into at the time. So I said, screw it, I'm just gonna boot up my old Nintendo and play some Star Tropics. And I sat down and played it from beginning to end, basically in one sitting. And at one point, I couldn't get past a certain part. I couldn't remember how to do it, and without the internet, I thought I was screwed. I had to call my dad up. He said, "Hey, you got the internet over there?" He's like, "Yep." I was like, "Well, look this up for me because I need to find out how to get past this part."
Yeah.
So I, walked him through something on GameFAQs, and he was reading me a walkthrough, and so via telephone and internet, I was able to make it past that part. I'm curious to know if maybe it was the dipping.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, that could very well be the case, and I don't know how we're supposed to know that.
And that kind of brings up an interesting point, and you're going to have to make this choice for yourself. A lot of the difficulty in these games is pretty easily solvable now. Back in the day, we didn't have the internet where we could look up these answers. We just had to bang our head against the problem. And I know I'm sounding like the old man back in our day, but that puzzle, that kind of difficulty was part of the game design.
Yeah.
Like, everyone now worries about replayability. How am I going to get people to come back? Well, back then it was like, no, we need to make these games challenging so people will continue to play them.
Yep.
So, are you going to cheat?
Yeah.
Or are you going to have the experience they intended?
You're going to cheat.
Yeah, maybe.
You have 30 games. Who has time for all this? Put in the cheat codes. Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
No build-up. Just Mario Brothers. 1986.
The game that lost 1,000 sequels.
Yeah, right? Seriously. This is before even Super Mario Brothers. This was the original Mario Brothers. Of course, Mario had already been in Donkey Kong. And
But he wasn't named back then, was he?
he was not named.
No, he was not named.
Nope. In fact, I think they referred to him as Jumpman.
Yes.
And I think that's
That
what
sounds
this
right.
game was going to be called. So it's Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario.
Oh, who also did Excitebike, by the way. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, did he?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Smart guy.
The other person who worked on this with Miyamoto, Gunpei Yokai.
Hey, we've heard that name before.
Yep.
Where-
So they worked on this together, and Gunpei actually suggested to Miyamoto that that Mario and Luigi should be able to fall off of ledges and not die. So during the game creation process, and Shigeru Miyamoto was like, I don't think so. What kind of game is that going to be if they can't fall? And like if they fall, they should die. And he goes, no. He's like, it's going to be more of a bouncy game and blah blah blah. And he caved and said, I'm glad I made this decision.
He was right.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with Donkey Kong, this is one of the very first platformers ever made.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. And if you're a younger viewer, you might recognize this gameplay footage as something that appeared in Super Mario Bros. 3. Because in Super Mario Bros. 3, when you're going around the map as Mario and Luigi, you can choose what level you want to go to, or you can go to the square that your friend is on, and you can have player versus player, 1v1 battle.
That's right.
And then you can fight each other for cards. But where that game came from, where it originated, was right
Mario
here.
Brothers.
This is the original Mario Brothers. Unlike any Super Mario game, in Mario Brothers, you can't just jump on an enemy to kill it. In fact, that will kill you.
Yes.
You have to hit the floor underneath it to flip your enemy over, and then before it gets up, you have to run over it to fly it off the screen. Otherwise, it'll get up and be pissed, turn red, and come at you much faster than it was coming at you before. You don't want that. Bad news. There's not really much more to say about it. I am a huge fan of this game. People differ on their opinions. It's not regarded as a classic as Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3 are. But this is where it all started, and I think this is one of the classic co-op arcade games out there.
Yeah, and that's the important thing to mention. It's co-op,
Yeah.
which there weren't that many of that kind of game around. There was like, I take my turn, you take your turn. You were both playing at the same time, which is pretty spectacular.
Absolutely. So before we talk about the games that didn't make it that we want, let me just run through real quick. There's 30 games.
Anyone just have text running in front of us?
Right? It's gonna be the
Or is
fast.
there just more work for you?
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of work. I'm not gonna do it. I think I got most of these in alphabetical order. Balloon Fight, Bubble Bobble, Castlevania 1, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Double Dragon 2, The Revenge, Dr. Mario, Excitebike, Final Fantasy, Galaga, Ghosts and Goblins, Gradius, Ice Climber, Kid Icarus, Kirby's Adventure, I don't know why I stopped, Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 1, Super Mario Brothers 2, Super Mario Brothers 3, Mega Man 2, Metroid, Ninja Gaiden, Punch-Out featuring Mr. Dream, Pac-Man, Super C, Star Tropics, and Tecmo Bowl. I mean, Tecmo Bowl's a classic.
So Ghosts and Goblins.
Yeah.
That's you want to talk about games that were harder back then.
That's why I'm missing some of my hair.
Oh my god, that could be a whole episode on itself. But just buyer beware. If you've never played Ghosts and Goblins, make sure there's nothing breakable near you
Yeah.
while you start to play this,
Because you will break it.
Oh man.
Speaking of Ghosts and Goblins, my missing in action game
Yes.
is called Gargoyles Quest 2.
Gargoyles Quest. Oh yes. Okay.
Yep.
I think I remember this cover art.
Yep, it's a big red demon,
Yes.
and that demon is from Ghosts and Goblins. He's the big
Right.
bad guy,
Right,
and his name
okay.
is Firebrand.
Hey, Firebrand.
Yep, it was a 1992 NES game. Like I said, it's Gargoyles Quest 2. The original was on Game Boy.
Okay.
Game Boy 1 had a little bit more RPG element to it in terms of like random battles and stuff like that. But the NES Gargoyles Quest 2 is sort of like the perfect balance because there's 3 games in this series, and this one I think is the best. You run around the overworld, and there are no random battles.
Oh.
You have some stuff to do in towns, whatever, but the overworld is just to get you from level to level.
Okay.
And every time you hit a level, it's a side-scrolling platformer. And you can kind of fly a little bit because you got wings.
Huh.
And you can cling onto walls a la Ninja Gaiden.
Right.
And there's all these cool power-ups, and it is a phenomenal game. Super difficult. Totally worth it. It's not on this, but you should find a way to play it.
Okay. Is it on the Virtual Console for the Wii or Wii U?
That is an excellent question.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes. I know there's cheaper ways to play it than buying the cartridge, and the cartridge is kind of expensive at this point. So yeah, there's got to be other ways to play it, hopefully legally.
Hopefully, yeah. We want to encourage that.
We do.
Yes.
Absolutely. But that was just a quick aside. Did you have one that you wish was on here?
Yeah, so here's what I'm going to do. There are many games which have started out in Japan and then go through some kind of translation process to go to the European market or the American market. You know, Super Mario Brothers 2, for example.
Doki
started a very different game. So I want to play a little game here. I'm going to give you a description of the original Japanese version and see if you can guess what game I'm talking about. Okay, there are some slight differences, obviously. So,
if you've ever seen video game True or False, I'm terrified.
This would be a perfect True or False thing, and I'm kind of sorry I'm using it for this. But so you're on a planet called Sophia the Third in the Epsilon Milky Way. Emperor Goes conquered all of outer space, declared himself a god, and invaded your planet, Sophia the Third, with his army, the Imbem Dark Star Cluster. The only survivor was Nora's satellite, who has designed a superweapon called the Metal Attacker, piloted by a young boy named Kane Gardner. Does any of this sound familiar?
No.
All right, let me tell you the American version, which is slightly different.
God, I hope I get this at least.
A kid named Jason chases his frog named Fred, who hits a piece of radioactive material, grows many times his size, falls through a hole in the ground. Jason chases after the frog, finds a tank, and then spends the rest of the game fighting monsters and mutants to eventually hit the main boss, the plutonium boss.
Oh God, this could be so many things just because my brain is fried. It's not Blaster Master, is it?
It is exactly Blaster Master.
Right.
Yes.
Great Sunsoft game.
So, yeah, a fantastic game, and just I was reading this, like, the original Japanese description makes so much more sense, I guess, because it's a science fiction thing than a kid finding his frog, but I like that story so much better.
Oh, it reeks of classic Nintendo games.
Yeah, and
so much more.
If you know this game, you have, like, the opening cut sequence embedded in your mind, you know, chasing, he's going after his frog. Yeah, so that like weird little quirky intro kind of hides, and I think it shut a lot of people off. Like, this is a stupid game, to one of the best platformers, I think, ever. It very much plays like a Metroid style game. But what's very different is, so you're Jason, this tiny little guy with a little pew 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 gun, but you find the tank, which is called Sophia the Third. Pretty much the only reference to the original story.
I don't think I knew that.
When you're in the tank, it's very mobile, very strong and powerful. Yeah. The tank and you have your own health bars, though. So when you're walking around and you get hurt, you can get back in the tank and get recharged. Which gets a sense of, like, you really feel like, oh, I'm safe in the tank. Great. The tank can jump, can shoot in multiple directions. You can get, eventually you get power-ups. What's nice is, or challenging, I suppose I should say, so let's say you need to get to a certain place. Well, the tank needs to be able to, let's say, hover to do that. Well, you don't have the hover thing yet, so you've got to get out and explore around, and then the game shifts and turns into a top-down 2D, like, you know, again, like Star Tropics or like Zelda, very popular. And so you're going through there, then fighting bosses like that. And then you get into your tank, you get the new thing that opens up a new area for you. I cannot say enough about how awesome this game was and how insanely difficult this game was.
Yep.
There were no saves, there were no codes. If you were going to beat Blaster Master, you were going to play the whole thing through. Yeah. The only saving grace was a cheat, which I hope they somehow recreate. There was a grenade cheat. Now, if you played this game, you'll remember this. This was one of the most satisfying moments in gaming. If you timed it right, you lobbed your grenade at a boss, it hit them and explodes, you hit pause. What happens is all the game action pauses except the explosion, and the boss continues to take damage. So you wait 10, 15 seconds, unpause, hey, insanely difficult boss is beaten, and you can move on.
Can't wait to see if this makes it in.
I really want to, yeah, because from what I've heard, they are doing a lot. They've included, like, what do they call, like, the 8-bit mode or whatever to really make it look like, or the CRT mode, to really make it look like the old thing. So to really catch that feeling of nostalgia, they've got to have the grenade cheat. But
we shall see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why are we even saying that? It's not on the system. Yeah, it didn't. It's not going to be on.
We
there.
shall not see.
We
You
shall
got
not
me
see.
all
Wow.
riled up about this.
I know. I got myself
Yep.
riled up. So it
Yeah.
is something that's made it onto other consoles. It's on the Wii U, the
Yeah.
virtual consoles.
And don't
all
get
that.
confused, because there is a Blaster Master 2 on the Genesis. There was a Blaster Master Blasting Again on PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
And then there was a remake of some kind on the Wii, I think.
And they're all awful.
Yeah, well, for the most part, the first one's the way to go.
Yeah.
By
And
far.
the other thing I wanted to say, like, even going back now to maybe a less than legal version I may have played recently, that not actually happened. The control, like, it just, you get that. I don't know how they do it. You get a feeling of the weight of the tank as it's going around. The controls are so great.
Like
and
the
so
shocks and the wheels actually like come together a little bit when
Yeah,
it
yep.
hops up.
Yeah,
it all works really well together.
Yeah, so I'm really disappointed that didn't make it. And if you have any way to play this, it's definitely, if you haven't played this, it's one of the classics of Nintendo.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many games to play. There are so many games we wish that were on there. Why don't you, if you comment below, let us know what games you wish were on there. What games are you looking forward to that are actually on there? There's something for everybody.
And if you're a younger player who didn't grow up with these games, I'd be really interested to hear, like, what games are you actually looking forward to? Because for me, it's a nostalgia trip. I'll be the first to admit that. But I want to see, like, someone who's kind of younger, like, I'm going back and playing these old games. What ones are you interested in playing?
Right. Or if you're a younger gamer, are you interested in this at all?
Yeah, we kind of. I really want to see what's going to happen when I show it to my kids.
Yeah.
And see how they deal with it. So.
Right on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will certainly be back next week with another topic that we hope you're interested in. And, definitely check out these guys. These are phenomenal. Do I get to keep this and put it up on the wall?
That's yours, dude.
So exciting.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Without Parole mugs are showing up tomorrow.
Ooh.
For the midnight... Nope. For where are we? For the Gaming Without Parole, my name is Brian Paul.
And my name is Dezrah.
And we will absolutely see you next week.
Adios.